So the author says procuring, controlling, owning, taking, claiming, and entitlement. So procuring, that means getting. Controlling means that it includes not owning something, but having it under your discretion, like a dog. Owning, taking, taking includes finding something, stealing something. Claiming, so claiming, we're talking about here uh, when you found something or when you developed unclaimed land. And entitlement, being entitled to something or deserving of something. Like if you own something, you can sell it. If you don't have any restriction, you can sell it. Like if you own your house, you can sell it. You can go right outside to somebody and say, I'll sell this house to you for $5. If he says, I accept, then it's his house now, even if he didn't give you the $5 yet. The owner in reality is Allah, Rabbul Alameen, Malikul Mulk. Rabbul Alameen means owner of creations. Malikul Mulk means owner of the dominion. The human's ownership is figurative, and God's ownership is true and absolute, meaning God is the one who truly owns everything, and the human doesn't really own anything. He has a permission. His ownership is really a type of permission. It's not a real ownership, a permission from God. Allah has not owned, and He does not need anything. He does with His creation what He wills, and He rules His creations by whatever rules He wills. What is good and valid is what He says, and as His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam conveys. So we started here. These introductory words, they have a theme of ownership because this is a base that we want to start from to understand all different types of dealings. Ownership and entitlement and deservingness and rights. Some things cannot be kept in possession. You can't have them. You can't keep them. Like pigs. So if you had a pig pen outside your house, you can't keep that. It's haram. And golden or silver utensils, according to what is correct. When we say you can't keep them in possession, it means keep them without using them. It is permissible to buy golden and silver utensils, though. Buying them, that's permissible. Buying them for their substance, that's permissible. For their substance means what they're made of. When I say kept in possession, maybe a good word is collected. Like if you're a collector, like if you have a hobby, for example. Maybe some people they have a hobby, they collect stamps or they collect transformers or baseball cards or model cars, for example, or something like that. Model planes. So this is what we're talking about, like golden and silver utensils. You can't even collect them. Not that you can't buy them and have them, but you can't be a collector. And then you just keep them. A person would see, I didn't think it's clear for you. A person would see a model car or a toy car even, and it might be so cool to him, so I'll buy it. He doesn't want to play with it, just wants to put it on his windowsill or something. So some things cannot be kept in possession. Yani, they can't be collected, like pigs and golden or silver utensils, according to what's correct. When we say according to what's correct means there's a difference in opinion here. Some said you can be a collector. You just can't use it. Using it, the prohibition of using golden and silver utensils, that's agreed upon. What about being a collector, though? The strong saying is that that's not permissible too. Not what is lightly plated, though. That's not considered a golden or silver utensil. What's lightly plated. Like you have a container. It's lightly plated with gold, but it's not a golden container. Or maybe you have a watch. It's plated. What determines if it's lightly plated or not? If you can melt the plating off and collect it. If the plating is collectible by melting it and gathering it, then that's too much. Then it's haram. Hmm. An amount you can't collect if you were to expose it to fire or expose it to heat. There's also details about soldering. If you had a broken container and you want to solder it with silver, there's details there now. I don't have them in my mind. I'll maybe put a footnote here, inshallah. Keeping a dog, not for guarding or hunting and the like, yani, it's a useless dog, in other words. He just keeps it because he likes it. This makes one's reward decrease daily. Yeah, but technically you don't own it. That's why we say keeping it, keeping the dog. Yeah, it's useless dog. Not for security, not for hunting, not because you have sheep. It helped you keep the sheep together or something like that, or you're blind or the like. Also, one cannot keep pictures of what can be alive, according to Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i. According to Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i, that includes statues and images that are not statues, like photographs, pictures drawn on a piece of paper, and the like. There's details there, like if it's on the ground and people step on it, it wouldn't be haram, and some other details. Malik says the only thing that's haram is a statue. So, according to Malik, you can keep these pictures, photographs, and things like that. According to Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i, not only you can't keep those, you have to destroy them. That means you have to render them in such a way that they don't depict something alive, like ripping the head off of it. Mere seizure of something does not dictate ownership. Just because you got it in your hand, it's not going to be yours. And also, what some people say, just because it's in your house doesn't mean it's yours. Some people that say, if it's here, if it's in my house, it's mine. That's injustice. But if you found something in your house and you didn't know if it was yours or not, then apparently it's yours. You can keep it. What appears is that it is yours. So then you can keep it. Malik said that only statues are haram. So according to him, you can keep the photographs and the likes of those. So mere seizure of something does not dictate ownership. Just because you captured it in your hand, that doesn't mean it's yours. That you own it, I mean. Like untanned skin. You skinned an animal. Now you have its skin in your hand. Just because it's in your hand doesn't mean you own it. But you do control it. So nobody can come and take it from you before you own it and say to you, you don't own this religiously. Give it to me. That's haram. So then you might scratch your head. Well, what's the difference between that and owning it? Well, if you don't own it, you can't sell it because you can't sell what you don't own. And you're not authorized to sell either. So one might say, then I don't get it. What's the difference? The difference is they have something in common. Having control over something and owning something, they have something in common there. Like if you own it, you have control over it. But if you have control over it, doesn't mean you own it. Or you might even own something without having control over it. Like if it ran away from you or it was taken from you. Still yours though. So when would you own that skin? One owns it after tanning it. Just like developing unclaimed land. You're not going to own it just because you put four rocks. You say, oh, this is mine now. That's not valid. Rather, after you develop it, like we're going to say, inshallah, then you own it. So the skin is like that. After you tan it, so you're going to do a little bit more work, then you'll own it. More than just pulling the skin off, something else, then you'll own it. Now, I'm talking about you didn't already own the animal, though. I'm not talking about if you already owned the animal. That's different. Possibly because you might slaughter it. If it's edible, you might slaughter it, and then by slaughtering the edible animal, it remains pure. It doesn't turn najis. So if it remained pure and didn't turn najis, you didn't stop owning it because you can't own najis. That's clear? So right now we're talking about, let's say you just found a dead animal and you skinned it, or you shot a deer or something and then you skinned it, or a bear. So you will own the skin when you tan it. And mere ownership does not permit dealing. So just because you own something doesn't mean you can deal with it, because you might be restricted, as we're going to say. Like if you're a child below puberty, you might own something as a child below puberty, doesn't mean you can sell it. Like you might have an inheritance, so it's yours, but you can't deal with it yet. Or you might be crazy, same thing. You might have gotten an inheritance and you're just as crazy as they come. You need a wali. May Allah protect us. And so mere ownership does not permit dealing. You might be restricted by the judge, Muslim judge. That's not going to remove your ownership, but you can't deal. And we'll see other cases of restriction, inshallah. That he can't deal. Correct, correct. Now, if you do own something, then there's some scenarios you might experience. Because you may give something to someone else, but you want it back. So you might own something, and then you give it to someone, and you want it back. So that's going to be like what? That's like letting someone borrow an item of yours. He has to give it back to you the way you gave it to him. So you may give something to someone while wanting it back, and that's with or without a profit. So if it's with a profit, so you gave it to someone and you want it back and you want to be paid too, you want to get paid and you want it back too, then what type of deal is that? That's a rental. Exactly. But in that case, you lose the right to it. That's what you're basically selling. Because how are you going to get a profit? In order to get a profit means there must have been something you gave. In this case, it's going to be the right to the item. You're still going to own the object itself, house, the car, etc. But the right to it, you don't own it anymore. That's what you're getting paid for. And you want the item back too. So one may give something while wanting it back, with or without a profit. Or he might give something while seeking something else in return. So what type of deal is that? Yes. Yes. Or what's another word? Yes. Or another word. Yes. A sale. That's what I was looking for. Yes. That's a sale. One obtains permanent ownership of an item. Item means object. Or of a right. And right means benefit. Yani, there's two types of things you could own. You could own an object, a physical object, or you could own a benefit. That means you could own a right. So how are you going to get possession of this object or right? One way is by a purchase. You purchase the item, it's yours now, permanently until you die, unless you do something. Then when you die, it's going to go to your heirs. The right to the object, not the right, the ownership of the object or the ownership of the right. The right is like paying for the right to have water routed to your land. So it's not the land you're buying. It's not the water you're buying. There's a right you're buying. You're buying the right for the water to be routed to your land. That's owning a right, buying a right. Yes. We're talking about what type of thing can you even own? All of what you can own boils down to two things: an object or a right. Or you might say it could be concrete or abstract. You might own something concrete. That means physical. A house, a car, an animal, etc., clothing. Or you might own a right, which this is rarer case, less frequent. Most of the time you'll be buying an object. How could you obtain this permanent ownership of an item or a right? By a purchase, or by a gift, or by inheritance. It's yours now. And one can obtain temporary ownership of a right in particular by a rental. So you have temporary ownership and a permanent ownership. Permanent ownership is going to include objects and rights. The temporary ownership is just going to include rights. And the original owner is going to retain ownership of the object. And that's going to be by a rental. So it became clear here that there's a difference between an object and a benefit. So, with that difference being clear, then know that a woman's dowry also can be either of those. Her dowry could be physical money. We already know from other lessons, money is all sorts of things, whether it's bullion or merchandise. So, her dowry could be some physical money, clothing, a book, cash, etc. Or her dowry could be a benefit, like teaching her something or taking her on a trip. If one neither wanted it back nor anything in return, so we just said he might own something and he could give it to somebody and want it back. And if he does that, he might want it back with a profit or without a profit. But what if he didn't want it back? If he didn't want it back, well, we said he might want something else in return. What if he didn't want it back and he didn't want anything else in return? Then he's giving something away. And there's different scenarios there. Could be if he wants to help a person, he's doing a charity, a handout. If he wants to establish rapport with someone or honor someone, then it would be a gift. If he wants to make that official, it would be a donation. He could give something away without even putting it in someone else's ownership. Means he takes it out of his own ownership without putting it into anyone else's ownership. You know what case that is? Not a gift. Yeah, inheritance is after death, and the gift is going to be that he's putting it in someone else's ownership. I'm asking about that he's giving it away without giving it to anyone in particular. He didn't make anyone own it. Maybe, but what I was looking for, and I think actually we skipped it, was the dedication. The dedication, like if you say, I dedicate this house for the widows, or I dedicate this house as a masjid. Yes, I dedicate this land as a cemetery, a Muslim cemetery, for example. I dedicate this well for the travelers, for example. So now when he does that, he doesn't own it anymore. But nobody else in particular owns it. And it can only be used as per its condition. So it's possible for someone to give something away without even putting it in someone else's ownership. Or, of course, he might give something away by putting it in someone's ownership, like a gift. And it's possible that he could give something away, meaning, when I say give away, let me not say give it away, because give away means doesn't own it anymore. It's possible he could give something, he still owns it though. He could give something to someone without expecting it back, like food. So if you fed someone, if you didn't let him keep that food, then it's your food. He's eating your food. He's swallowing your food. But you're not going to get that back. So that's valid too, if you permit him. Same thing with your candle. You let him use your candle. So the way to use it is to light it, and it's going to melt. So you're not going to get it back the way he gave it to you, and you didn't let him have it also. So that's a case of allowing someone to consume something of yours. And furthermore, a partnership grants two or more people a percentage of ownership. Yani, more than one person could own a single thing, even without determined portions. So there's two cases here. One case is, let's say there's a house. Let's say there's a mansion. You own the west wing and I own the east wing, but it's all one mansion. So here, it's like we're not partners though. It's similar to not being partners because you have actually ownership of a physical portion of it, and I have ownership of another physical portion of it. So what you do, that doesn't affect me here. But there's another case where the ownership, the shared ownership, yani the partnership, is by percentage, not by physical borders, not by determined portions. So this same mansion, you might own 70% of it and I own 30% of it. Now, it's not a matter of what physical portion of the mansion you own or not. So then that takes us into the case of sharika, partnership. Yes, it is a partnership. That's the significant one, the one by percentage. Because then that one thing truly has more than one owner, not for any particular portion of it. As opposed to the case where you own the west wing, I own the east wing, then even though it's one mansion, but it's big and it's splittable. So there's a difference there. And also, intellectual property is an invalid innovation. Intellectual property. It means a person thinks of an idea and then he registers his idea with the government. And then the government says, okay, you own this now, and no one can deal with this idea without your permission. That's invalid. So, that being established, the issue of ownership here, all these scenarios of ownership, know that it is invalid to sell two things. One of them is something that's not money. Something that's not money. That means it doesn't have any monetary value. We're saying even if you own it, you might own it, but it does not have a monetary value. You cannot sell it. Like a mere grain or two, one grain of rice or two grains of rice, or one grain of wheat or two grains of wheat. This alone has no monetary value. It will have a value once you collect enough grains. Some more grains, put some more and more grains there, some amount, then it's going to have a value. Or even if you put it with other things, might not be the same grains, but you put it with some other things, and that the whole lot of those things with that two grain or two in them would have a value. Then you can sell that. And another type of thing that you cannot sell is what no slave of God owns. What no slave of God owns. So that includes filth, a freeman, someone who's not a slave, dedicated endowments. So that's the dedications we were just talking about. Once you dedicated that thing, it left your ownership. And nobody in particular owns it either. So no slave of God owns that. So you can't sell that. Public places like Arafah and Mina and Muzdalifah, and you cannot sell unclaimed land. You have to develop it first before you can sell it. And you can't sell the rivers and the banks of the rivers in the area around a well in unowned land. Yes, correct. But the river might flow through your land, though. The area around a well, the ground around a well in an unowned land. And we started by mentioning filth. You can't sell filth because you don't even own it. So that's going to include what? A dog, even if it's a trained dog, even if it is a coveted breed, it's not money. It doesn't have any monetary value. Wine prepared for vinegar. Why say wine prepared for vinegar? Because at least then there's a noble purpose for this wine. It's not there to drink it, it's there to make vinegar. Despite that, it has a noble purpose. You still can't sell it as long as it's wine. Or blood, because it's not just haram meat, manure, all these things that people would sell. You can't sell blood. Some people sell blood pudding, or they would sell their blood to so-called Red Cross or something. And they sell manure for the farmers. Subhanallah. Now it just crossed my mind. Some farmers who have pigs, they buy garbage. Subhanallah. I haven't heard the judgment of that. But if something is stained with najis and you can clean it, it's pure in itself, but it has a stain on it of najasa and you can clean it off, you can still sell it. Even if you didn't clean it off, you can still sell something like that because it's cleanable. It could be purified. And you cannot sell ivory according to some scholars. Excuse me. Because it's najis. I don't know how some scholars said you can sell ivory, but what we learned is that some scholars said you can. I don't know how they said you can, because it would be najis. Yani, unless we hear what's their madhab, how does it go in their madhab? In Shafi'i school is going to be najis because the elephant is not an edible animal. So if you kill it and take his tooth, that tooth's going to be najis. Or even if it's alive and the tooth falls off, still going to be najis. So then najis. You can't buy, according to that saying, you can't buy something made of ivory because it's najis. And this is why an animal cannot be sold by weight, because you can't buy najis. If you sell an animal by weight, then you'll be including the najis that's in its body in the price. So you cannot sell or buy an animal by weight. So if a person insists on selling it by its weight, if you accept the price that he wants, let him weigh it, and then he tells you the price he wants, and then you tell him, I buy this animal for this price. And that's it. And if you want, you can clarify for him. I buy it for this price, not because of its weight. And then you give him the money he wants. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, certainly Allah forbade the sale of wine, forbidden meat, pig, and idols. So that hadith is evidence that you can't buy or sell najasa. And you cannot divorce a woman who's not your wife. That's obvious. That came in a hadith. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the Muslims are partners in three things: the water, the pasture, and the fire. So this means the Muslims are partners in the resources. It's not restricted to these three. Not even the caliph can prevent people from public pasture, or wood, or fire, or mines, or springs. Correct. Or the public land. Whether it's unclaimed or public, you cannot stop the people from benefiting from their resources. What one collects from those sources becomes his, and he can transact with it. So that's basically a person. He goes into the woods, he gets a bunch of sticks and logs, for example, some clubs, I guess, some big thick sticks, and brings them back and sells them for firewood. That's valid. That's valid work. Or someone goes somewhere and he collects soil, and then he comes back to the market and he has soil for sale. That's valid. What one collects from those sources becomes his, and he can transact with it, even a child. If the child gets a stick, or he catches a fish, or whatever, if he finds a diamond in the mine, it's his. You just can't transact with it until he reaches puberty. Allah says, هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. He it is who created for you what is in the earth entirely, meaning of beneficial things, not harmful things. Harmful things are not included in this ayah because he forbids us from the harmful things, like poisonous plants and intoxicating plants. And why are we here, actually? Why, Yani? I think the flow of the information is clear, but just to point out what's not being said obviously, or what's not being said blatantly. Yani, as if we're dealing with a person that he started with nothing. He started from nothing, started from nowhere. We just started the book. We talk about deals. So, as they say, money doesn't grow on trees. He's going to be born without money. He's going to be born with no clothing and no knowledge, nothing. So, let's say he didn't get an inheritance. So, then how's he going to start? So, he's going to go out into the land, for example, and get some sticks or dig up some clay or the like or mine. And then he's going to come back to civilization and sell it to the people. And now he's getting started here. If one digs a well in unclaimed land, then there's three cases. Because he might dig this well to benefit the travelers or the Muslims in general, not for himself. Yani, he just dug the well. Let's say you Muslims were out camping or traveling or living on the land. So one of the Muslims, they said, "Oh, Muslims, I'm going to dig a well for us." So he didn't do it for himself, doing it for general purpose. Then he has no ownership of this well, and he doesn't have any priority over anyone else by virtue of his intention. Because we're saying there's three scenarios here. In all these three scenarios, he's physically doing the same thing, but his intention is different. He's physically digging the well. The same scenario from the outside. But what's on the inside means what's in his heart when he does it. So if he dug that well just for the general benefit of the Muslims or the travelers, not for himself, then he does not own this well and he has no priority over it or over anyone else. Or it could be that he dug the well to benefit himself. So this traveler, he says, while I'm here, I need a well. But I'm not staying here. I don't even plan on coming back. I just need to make a well for now, for my welfare. So he makes a well to benefit himself, not to own it. Then it also does not become his. But he does have priority as long as he stays there because he dug it for himself. And then he loses priority when he moves on. So he might come back later. He can't say, "Hey, I'm the one who dug this well." They're going to say, "So what you want? Do you want a cookie?" We don't have cookies out here. And the third case is that he dug the well to own it. Then the well becomes his and the water becomes his. Yes, if his intention was to own it. Now that's just the case of a well. But if we want to go bigger, one can possess unclaimed land. Possess here means own. Let me put the word own. Sometimes the word possess might come in this document and it means own, but possessing and owning are two different things, really. So I'll try not to mix them up. Having something in your possession means physical possession. Doesn't literally mean necessarily that you own it, though. So one can own unclaimed land by developing it. Only a Muslim can develop unclaimed Islamic land, except what the Caliph appropriates. That's one of the powers of the Caliph. In that Muslim empire, he can appropriate land for what he needs it for, like for the zakah animals, or silos, or vaults. Then, so we're saying here, the Caliph might have appropriated some land and he didn't use it yet. So you're in the wilderness with your stick in your backpack. You found a nice patch of land. You said, "This will do great." You saw on that land what the Caliph saw on that land. He just didn't do anything yet. He appropriated it before you. If you had already developed it, then he can't come and kick you off that land. But if he appropriated it before you developed it, and you didn't know he appropriated it, and then you started developing the land, and then you found out that he appropriated that land, then you need to go to him and ask for his permission. So what are you going to do? What's this development we're talking about here? You might want that land for inhabitants, or you might want it for a stable, or you might want it for planting and farming. So for inhabitants, you have to build an encompassing wall, and you have to put a ceiling over part of it, and you have to establish the gate. You do that much, then that's yours. And then you're going to work from there. Yes, you're going to build an encompassing wall for inhabitants. So let's say your four walls, unless it's a circle, an encompassing wall, and then put a ceiling over part of it and establish the gate. So here you are. Yeah, no, before the whole land. Yani, let's say you say, okay, here, I'm gonna settle here. So then you got to work and you started chopping down trees. And then you eventually managed to make a wall. So here, this wall, you don't own anything yet, and you need to put at least part of the ceiling up. So you're gonna put part of the ceiling up with who knows what, leaves or something, establish your ceiling or partial ceiling. Now, this, whatever you developed there, you own, and you put a gate, this, you own that. The gate is just the doorway. Yeah, you're gonna own the land that the structure's built on. Yes, yes. Now that's yours, and you're going to just go from there. You're living the land, and let's see, your pants are ripped above your ankles there, and you're basically a Muslim lumberjack or something. And you're going to be improving your house little by little, expanding your land, for example, as you live there and work there. For a stable, one builds an encompassing wall and a ceiling if needed. So what you might do after you built your house, even your house not done yet, you say, let me get the stable started. So you build your encompassing wall for your stable. You might say, I don't even need a ceiling for this one. Bam, that's yours now too. And for planting or farming, one has to clearly mark the borders and level the land and prepare the water canal if the water can get there. Not like he's on a plateau, the water's not going to go uphill. Or not if he doesn't need to prepare a canal, maybe he just doesn't need to. Maybe there's a river right next to it or something. The ground is fertile. And he plows if needed. And planting is not a condition. So he basically sets up his little tract of plowland. Bam, now that's yours too. Now you got yourself a nice little area here. He said, this is the beginnings of my city, inshallah. I named this place Muhammad Town. Once he owns it, yes. Once he owns it, he can transact with it, even without a deed. He doesn't need a piece of paper for that to prove it's his or something. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, verily, for one of you to take his rope, then go to the mountain, then come with a bundle of firewood on his back, then he sells it and thus becomes self-sufficient, is better than for him to ask the people whether they give to him or withhold from him. Despite that one may not own something, it might be in his control though, or that he may not be allowed to sell it even if he owns it. It is forbidden to take a single grain or a dog unrightfully. That single grain is owned even though it's not money. And that dog, even though it's not money, it's controlled. It's under your control. It is forbidden to take a single grain or dog unrightfully by party crashing. So that means entering the party uninvited. Or even if they let you go in, but you know they didn't want to, you still can't go. By moving property markers. So you push the property marker closer to your neighbor's property to expand your own. by keeping what one finds of others' belongings before proper advertisement, lost and found, yani, by keeping what one finds of others' belongings before proper advertisement, keeping lost and found items without advertisement, stealing, or extortion. Wallahu a'lam, we'll stop there.